Hello guys, welcome to another election prediction video. This time, this is going to be the next to last or second to last election prediction video of the 2022 Senate elections. I basically plan to do the last 2022 Senate elections, governor elections, and House elections all into one video titled 2020 or Final 2022 Midterm Election Prediction, and that'll be uploaded on November 7th. That's when I'm planning to put that up. So let's get to this next to last or second to last Senate prediction. Okay, so California, Oregon, Hawaii, not really going to be competitive in the safe Republican states. Alaska, I think it's extremely likely Murkowski wins by almost 10%. I would say she wins by 8 or 9 against her more Republican / more conservative opponent. Illinois is not going to be competitive. New York's not going to be competitive. Connecticut isn't either. Okay, so let's get into this. So Iowa, I ranked as safe mainly because every other poll shows Chuck Grassley up by over 10%. Plus, he's a decently popular incumbent in Iowa. Sure, that Seltzer poll did show some doubts that he would win by a landslide, but I think there's so much undecided voters in that poll that they'll probably gravitate towards Grassley anyway. In Utah, I think it's going to be a safe red state at this point. I mean, Emerson did a poll today that pretty much showed that McMullin was down by just about 10 points. So I think the Republican here is going to be able to beat McMullin by over 10, just barely. So like 10.5. That's what my estimate on the margin is there. In neighboring Colorado, it's really looking like ever since Trump said that Joe Adea is basically a rhino and not to vote for him, that pretty much torpedoed any chances of this race even going to lean. I just think the hardcore Republicans aren't even going to really vote on this part of the race, honestly. That's their House races they'll vote. But yeah, it's pretty much terrible for Republicans statewide in Colorado. They're going to lose the governor election by a lot, and they're going to lose the Senate election by, I would say, a decent amount. Much more closer than the governor election, though. In Washington State, I think the Democrat here is going to win by about 9 points against her Republican opponent. I really don't see a chance that she wins because Trafalgar is saying, oh, it's a single digit or within a couple points of race. I don't think that's true. I think Trafalgar just sucks at polling blue states. I mean, Trafalgar said that Vermont was only a lean state in one of their polls before, so they really just suck at polling blue states. Okay. Next state should we go to? Let's see. How about North Carolina and Florida? I'll start with Florida. I think Rubio's at this point is going to win by over 10. The early vote is just terrible for Democrats in this state, and I think Rubio has a really good connection with minority voters in this state as well, especially with Latino voters and Cuban voters, that I don't see how he doesn't win by over 10 at this point, especially with the early vote. It's looking awful for Democrats in Miami-Dade. And Miami-Dade might be competitive with DeSantis and Rubio. They might win the district or the county. They might win that county, which is just crazy. In North Carolina, Cherry Beasley is probably going to lose by over just about like 5 points, I would say. I think her campaign's coming to an end, especially with Ted Budd pretty much leading in nearly every single poll in North Carolina. So I think it's pretty much the end for her here. I don't think she could win anymore. Next state is Wisconsin. And Mandela Barnes, he could have won this race, but voters or the ads have slandered. Well, he actually is fairly left-wing, so I'm not sure about slandered's the right term. But they have pointed out that he has an extremely left-wing history, and that pretty much alienated a lot of voters from Mandela Barnes. Those negative attack ads destroyed his image in this state. That someone like Ron Johnson, who's had so many bad quotes before, like cutting Social Security, he's probably going to be the victory here with probably like nearly an 80% chance. I would even an 85% chance, but I think the margin is Johnson wins by about 3 or 4%, basically. So I think he's going to pull it off. But I do think Obama coming in the campaign for Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers, that's going to help turn out a bit. but I think it's pretty much over for Mandela Barnes here in the Senate race. Okay, state of New Hampshire. It's just about 4.5% victory for Maggie Hassan against Don Bolduc. I don't know why people still think Don Bolduc has a chance. I did move this race from likely to lead just because the polls are showing it was getting a bit closer. But I still think Hassan's going to pull off that victory against Bolduc. He's just terrible New Hampshire nominee, basically. Republicans had a great bench for New Hampshire. Could have run Chris Sununu. He would have won by a likely margin here, or even Kelly Oyette. He used to be the Republican senator of New Hampshire that Maggie Hassan beaten in the 2016 Senate elections just by about 1,000 or 2,000 votes. So they really blew it in this race. They could have won it. Let's see here. Let's go to Ohio. Ohio is the one state I honestly think it's going to be closer than Wisconsin. I used to have it as likely, but now that I've been reviewing and looking at this, there's a lot of early voting turnout that's very good for Democrats in this state. Plus, the polls, even Republican pollsters, can't get a lead for J.D. Vance over 5%, or it's just about 5%. So I think Tim Ryan's going to be probably like the candidate of this cycle that Democrats should have put more money into. He could have won this race, but he has like a 15 to 20% chance, to be honest. Maybe 25. Definitely more than Mandela Barnes, for sure. So keep an eye on this race. It's going to be a race to watch. I'm going to be watching it very closely. If Tim Ryan's winning this state, and he wins, that we'll know very early on, because I'm pretty sure Ohio counts their votes very fast. If he wins, that means Democrats just won the Senate. So keep an eye on Ohio. Very important. I think Vance will probably win by about 2 to 3% against Tim Ryan. He could win by more if undecideds break his way, but I think he has pretty bad unfavorables, while Tim Ryan is doing a pretty good job at marketing himself to a lot of these swing voters. Sort of like a Joe Manchin-esque campaign, basically, there in Ohio with Tim Ryan. All right, let's see here. We'll go to Arizona. Pretty much every poll, the worst poll for Mark Kelly was a tied race poll. That was just one or two of them that showed that. Every poll shows Mark Kelly leading by a lean margin, or it goes down to a tilt, but still. The fact that Blake Masters can't even lead in Republican internal polling, even against Mark Kelly, and it's an internal poll. If it was a close race, it would show him leading, but I really think Mark Kelly is probably going to pull off a 2 to 3% victory against Blake Masters. Very overrated candidate, Blake Masters, and he kind of blew a winnable race just because I think voters know that he's not really that much of a swing or a moderate candidate, and that's not going to appeal to swing voters. They know Blake Masters is a lot more right-leaning than he's letting on, especially with him deleting stuff on his campaign website. I'm sure Mark Kelly's campaign's hitting him on that. In Nevada, some polls have came out today that showed the Democrat, or yesterday, because I'm recording this a day before, but polls have shown the Democrat kind of tied with the Republican candidate and leading him, but the one with the lead in the polls, that was with a lot of undecided, so I have my doubts about it. Plus, in Nevada, the early voting numbers aren't amazing for Democrats, but most of the time with early voting, it's the last week before. That's where there's the most turnout in early voting. So we had to keep an eye on that. But for now, I still think the Republican here, Adam Laxalt, probably the most normal Republican candidate, just with Ted Budd, the two most normal Republicans. They really pretty much just decent candidates for Republicans here, and that's why they're pretty much going to win these seats. If they ran really good candidates in Georgia and Pennsylvania, the Republicans probably win those seats as well, but they chose to run with Herschel Walker and Mehmet Oz, who have just terrible unfavorables. Herschel Walker, not as much, but Mehmet Oz, really bad unfavorables. But Nevada, just based on the early voting numbers so far, Republicans have the advantage. Okay. In Georgia, so far the early voting numbers are pretty even to both sides. I mean, they aren't like amazing for Democrats, isn't amazing for Republicans. It's pretty standard, but I think Herschel Walker will definitely benefit from Brian Kemp at the top of the ticket, getting a big lead for himself against Stacey Abrams, and that might help Walker a bit. However, I think this race in Georgia is for sure going to a runoff, and honestly, I think the candidate that's more likely to win a runoff will probably be Warnock. I still think he's going to lead, and most of the polls that come out recently for Georgia are only right-leaning pollsters that's saying Walker's going to win, Walker's going to win. They're all been right-leaning, except for the New York Times poll that showed it at 49-46. And the New York Times poll is pretty decent in Georgia typically. They don't really miss the mark that much in this state compared to like states like in the Rust Belt. So I still think Warnock has the advantage here, but it's going to a runoff, and that'll probably maybe decide Senate control that runoff. Now, in Pennsylvania, before I had it as a tilt Republican state, now it's like I think the one candidate here has a 51% chance of winning compared to another candidate's 49% chance at winning. Because there's been a lot of right-leaning polls coming out of Pennsylvania saying Mehmet Oz is going to win by about 2 to 3 points. And there's recently been a New York Times poll that said Fetterman's going to win by about 5.5%. But the big but is that poll was taken a couple days before the debate, but the end of the poll was on the day of the debate. And they did say Fetterman's lead went down a bit, but he was still up in the poll by around 2 to 3%. So, factoring in New York Times missing the races by a bit, I still... it's a hard race to predict, but I really think Fetterman could still pull off a victory here, and I still think he's slightly favored just because Democrats are doing pretty good at getting early vote out in Pennsylvania, which is highly beneficial for them, and I still think that Democrats are still energized in this state of Pennsylvania, and they'll still vote for Fetterman no matter his medical issues, which I don't really think... I think for swing voters, for sure, the medical issues will be very important to them, but then again, Oz has very bad unfavorables in this state, so Fetterman could still pull off a victory here, and I still think he is narrowly favored to win this state. So we have a 50-50 Senate with very close races in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Just a couple of these races could swing, and the Republicans could maybe get up to 52 seats. Arizona and New Hampshire are looking a bit out of reach for them, same way as Wisconsin is looking out of reach for Democrats, while Ohio is still within reach, but I still think Vance is favored. So that's my 2022 Senate election prediction. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.